The champagne glass in my hand shook as my father's voice boomed across the ballroom. 200 guests in expensive suits and glittering dresses turned to stare at me. I stood there in my only good suit, the one I wore to funerals, while my father, Richard, pointed at me like I was something dirty on his shoe. "This one," he said, his voice dripping with disgust. Nathan here decided he was too good for the family business. While his brothers Connor and Derek built our empire with me, this fool chose to play with dogs and cats. Laughter rippled through the crowd. My face burned hot. "So let me make this clear on my 70th birthday," Richard continued, raising his glass. "I'm splitting my $36 million estate between Connor and Derek. 18 million each. They earned it. They're real men. Nathan gets nothing. Not one penny. He's worthless to me. He's been worthless since the day his mother died and couldn't protect him anymore." The room went silent. Even the people who had been laughing looked uncomfortable now. My oldest brother Connor smirked at me from across the room. Derek didn't even look up from his phone. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. Instead, I just stood there, frozen, while my father turned his back on me and raised a toast to my brothers. Before we continue, please drop a comment if you've ever experienced something like this. We'd love to hear your story and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. Let me take you back to the beginning to help you understand how I ended up at that terrible moment. My name is Nathan Cole, and I'm 42 years old. For the past 15 years, I've run a small veterinary clinic on the edge of Portland. It's not fancy. The roof leaks when it rains hard. The waiting room chairs are old and mismatched, but I love it. Every scared puppy I calm down, every sick cat I help heal, every grateful owner who hugs me with tears in their eyes. That's my reward. My mother Margaret understood that about me. She died 20 years ago, when I was 22, just after I graduated from college. Cancer took her fast, 6 months from diagnosis to gone. In those final weeks, when she could barely speak, she held my hand and told me to follow my heart. "Don't let anyone tell you your dreams are too small," she whispered. "Kindness is never worthless." My father never forgave me for not joining his company. Richard Cole built Cole Pharmaceuticals from nothing, or that's what he always told everyone. He started with one small research lab and grew it into a massive empire. Patents for drugs that helped millions of people. Factories in 3 states. Deals with hospitals and medical centers across the country. Connor and Derek jumped right into the business after college. Connor handled the sales and marketing side. Derek managed the research labs. They both lived in huge houses in the rich part of town. They drove expensive cars. They married beautiful women who looked like models. They had the life my father always wanted for all his sons. But I couldn't do it. Something about the pharmaceutical business felt cold to me. I watched my mother die, despite all the expensive medicines. I saw how the bills piled up, how the costs of staying alive could destroy a family's savings. When I told my father I wanted to be a veterinarian instead, he called me stupid. He said I was throwing away a fortune to play doctor with animals. We barely spoke after that. Holidays were tense and awkward. He never visited my clinic, not once in 15 years. When I got married to a wonderful woman named Amy, he showed up late to the wedding and left early. When Amy and I divorced 5 years later because the stress of my father's rejection had poisoned our relationship, he told me I couldn't even keep a wife happy. My mother would have handled things differently. She would have supported me. She would have visited my clinic and loved seeing me happy. But she was gone, and I was alone with a father who saw me as a failure. So when the invitation came for Richard's 70th birthday party, I almost didn't go. The fancy card with gold lettering arrived at my clinic on a Tuesday morning. A celebration of success and family legacy, it said. Amy, we stayed friends after the divorce, told me I should skip it. Why let him hurt you again? She asked. But some stupid part of me hoped things might be different. Maybe turning 70 had made my father think about his life. Maybe he regretted the distance between us. Maybe, just maybe, he wanted to fix things before it was too late. I was so wrong. The party was at the Grand Hotel downtown. The ballroom was decorated with white flowers and golden ribbons. A full orchestra played soft music. Waiters in tuxedos carried trays of expensive food. I recognized businessmen and politicians in the crowd. Everyone who was anyone in Portland seemed to be there. Connor spotted me first. He walked over with that confident swagger he'd learned from our father. Nathan, surprised you could afford the gas money to get it here. He laughed like it was a joke, but his eyes were cold. Derek joined us, looking me up and down. Nice suit. Is that from a thrift store? I wanted to defend myself, but what was the point? They'd made up their minds about me years ago. I was the family embarrassment, the brother who threw away his chance at real success. The party went on for hours. I stood in corners trying to be invisible. I watched my father hold court, telling stories about business deals and victories. He put his arms around Connor and Derek, his pride obvious. He never even glanced my way. Then came the speeches. Connor talked about the company's latest breakthrough in heart medication. Derek discussed expansion plans for new research facilities. Everyone clapped and cheered. My father beamed with pride. And then Richard took the microphone for his final announcement. That's when he pointed at me. That's when he destroyed me in front of everyone. That's when he told the world I was worthless. After the speech, people avoided me like I had a disease. I set down my champagne glass and headed for the exit. My hands were shaking. My throat was tight. I just wanted to get to my truck and drive away and never think about this family again. But as I reached the hallway outside the ballroom, someone called my name. Mr. Cole, Nathan Cole. I turned to see an older man in a dark suit. He had silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I recognized him vaguely from past family events, but couldn't place him. I'm Thomas Whitmore, he said quietly. I was your mother's attorney. I still handle some legal matters for the Cole family. He glanced back at the ballroom doors nervously, then pulled a sealed envelope from his jacket. It was yellowed with age, and my mother's handwriting was on the front. For Nathan, to be opened on Richard's 70th birthday. My heart stopped. My mother's handwriting. After 20 years. She gave this to me 2 weeks before she died, Thomas said, his voice barely above a whisper. She made me promise to keep it safe, to give it to you on this exact day. She said you'd need it. He pressed the envelope into my hands. His fingers were trembling. Your mother was a brilliant woman, Nathan, much more brilliant than anyone knew. Read this somewhere private. And be careful, very careful. Before I could ask what he meant, Thomas Whitmore turned and walked quickly back toward the ballroom, leaving me alone in the hallway, holding an envelope from a woman who'd been dead for 20 years. I sat in my truck in the parking garage for 20 minutes, just staring at the envelope. My mother's handwriting. I'd forgotten how elegant it was, How she made even my name look beautiful. The paper was thick and expensive, the kind she used for important things. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside were 3 items: a handwritten letter, a business card for a law firm in Seattle, and a small key with a number stamped on it. 2847. I unfolded the letter. My mother's words, frozen in time from 20 years ago, spoke to me. My dearest Nathan, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and your father has lived to see his 70th birthday. I'm sorry I won't be there to see the man you've become, but I know in my heart you've followed your dreams and stayed true to yourself. You were always the kindest of my boys, the one with the biggest heart. That's why I'm trusting you with the truth. Nathan, your father didn't build Cole Pharmaceuticals from nothing. He built it on lies, theft, and murder. My murder. My vision blurred. I had to stop reading and wipe my eyes. Murder? My mother died of cancer. Everyone knew that. The doctors said so. There was a funeral. I watched them lower her casket into the ground. I forced myself to keep reading. The cancer was real, but it came too fast, too aggressive. I was healthy 1 month, dying the next. Your father poisoned me, Nathan. Small doses of compounds from his lab, designed to trigger rapid cell mutations. He thought I didn't know. But I was a scientist, too. Better than he ever was. I ran my own blood tests in secret. I found the traces. By the time I had proof, I was too weak to fight. The cancer had already spread. He won. But I made sure he wouldn't win forever. My chest felt tight. I couldn't breathe right. This had to be a mistake. Some kind of sick joke. But the handwriting was definitely my mother's. The paper was old, genuinely aged, and Thomas Whitmore's terrified face came back to me. "Be careful," he'd said. "Very careful." The letter continued. Cole Pharmaceuticals was built on patents stolen from my father, your grandfather Samuel. He was a genius researcher who developed revolutionary drug formulas in the 1970s and 80s. When he died suddenly of a heart attack in 1989, 2 years after Richard and I married, your father took all of Samuel's research. He changed a few things, filed new patents under his own name, and built an empire on my father's work. I didn't realize what he'd done until years later. When I confronted him and threatened to expose everything, he started poisoning me. I felt sick. My grandfather, Samuel. I barely remembered him. I was only 4 when he died. But I remembered my mother crying for weeks. I remembered the funeral. Another funeral. Another person Richard had supposedly loved who died unexpectedly. I've hidden evidence in a safety deposit box at Pacific Trust Bank in Seattle. The key is with this letter. Box number 2847. Inside you'll find copies of your grandfather's original research, proof of the patent theft, and documentation of the compounds your father used to poison me. There's also information about a trust fund my father set up for me before he died. $8 million that Richard doesn't know exists. It's in your name now. The law firm's business card will help you access everything. $8 million. I read that line 3 times. My mother had hidden $8 million for me? Nathan, I'm not asking you to get revenge. I'm asking you to get justice. For me, for your grandfather, for everyone who suffered because of Richard's greed. But please, be smart about it. Your father is dangerous. He's powerful. He has connections. Don't move until you have everything in place. And whatever you do, don't trust your brothers. I love Connor and Derek, but they're too much like their father. They chose his path. You chose mine. That's why I'm giving this to you. That's why I know you'll do the right thing. I love you, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. Make him pay. Mom. I sat there in my truck, the letter trembling in my hands, and I cried. I cried for my mother. I cried for my grandfather. I cried for all the years I thought I was the failure, the disappointment, when really I was the only one who hadn't become a monster. Then the sadness turned to something else, something cool and sharp and clear. Anger. I drove straight to Seattle that night. It took 3 hours. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind raced with everything I'd learned. Every memory of my mother took on new meaning now. Her sadness in those final months, the way she held my hand, the things she said. Don't let anyone tell you your dreams are too small. She wasn't just talking about being a veterinarian. She was telling me to stay good, to not become like Richard. The law firm opened at 8 in the morning. I was waiting outside at 7:30. When the receptionist finally unlocked the doors, I showed her my mother's business card and letter. Within an hour, I was sitting across from a senior partner named Virginia Hayes, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s. Your mother was incredibly brave, Virginia said, after reading the letter. She came to us 20 years ago, knowing she was dying, and set everything up to protect you. The trust fund is real. The evidence is real. We've been maintaining that safety deposit box for 2 decades, waiting for this day. We went to Pacific Trust Bank together. Virginia stood beside me as I used the small key to open box 2847. Inside was a thick folder of documents. My grandfather's original research notes in his own handwriting, patent applications that predated Richard's by years, chemical formulas, lab results, and a sealed medical file with my mother's name on it, containing blood test results and analysis proving the presence of laboratory-manufactured compounds designed to trigger aggressive cancer. This is enough, Virginia said quietly. This is enough to destroy him. But I didn't want to just destroy him quietly. I didn't want lawyers and courtrooms where Richard could use his money and connections to drag things out for years. I wanted everyone to know what he was. I wanted the same public humiliation he'd given me. Over the next 2 weeks, I planned everything carefully. I worked with Virginia to get all the documents certified and authenticated. We contacted a journalist from the Portland Tribune who specialized in corporate crime. I made copies of everything and put them in safe locations. I even hired a private investigator to dig into Richard's current business dealings, and what we found made everything worse. Cole Pharmaceuticals was currently in the middle of a massive deal. They were about to sell the company to a major corporation for $85 million. The sale was scheduled to close in 1 month. Connor and Derek would walk away with millions on top of their inheritance. Richard would retire as a legendary businessman, unless I stopped it. The investigator also found something else interesting. Thomas Whitmore, my mother's old attorney, still worked for the Cole family, but he'd been trying to quit for years. Richard wouldn't let him go. He knows where all the bodies are buried, Connor had joked to a business associate in an email the investigator obtained. The joke wasn't funny anymore. I called Thomas and asked to meet him privately. We sat in a coffee shop far from downtown, where nobody would recognize us. I know what Richard did, I told him. I have my mother's letter. I have the evidence. Thomas's hands shook as he held his coffee cup. I've been waiting 20 years for this conversation, he said. Your mother made me promise to give you that letter, but she made me promise something else too. She made me promise to testify if you ever decided to come forward. I was Richard's attorney back then. I helped him file those patents. I didn't know they were stolen at the time, but I've known for 15 years. Your mother told me the truth before she died, and I've been too much of a coward to do anything about it." "Why didn't you say something?" I asked. "Because I have a family," Thomas said, and his voice broke. "Because Richard threatened my children. Because I was afraid. But I'm dying now, Nathan. Lung cancer. 6 months, maybe less. I'm not afraid anymore. I'll testify to everything. I'll give you every document I have. I want to do one good thing before I die." So I had my evidence. I had my witness. I had my money. Now I needed my stage. Richard was being honored at the Portland Business Excellence Awards in 3 weeks. Every important person in the city would be there. The mayor, the governor, business leaders, media. It would be televised. It would be perfect. I bought a ticket to the awards ceremony. I contacted the journalist and gave him everything, timed for release the same night. I prepared my speech. Virginia helped me draft legal documents to file immediately afterward. The private investigator arranged for federal authorities to be present at the venue. Everything was ready. But 2 days before the awards ceremony, my phone rang at 2 in the morning. It was Thomas Whitmore's daughter. "Mr. Cole," she said, crying, "my father died tonight. Heart attack. He was fine this afternoon, and then they're saying it was natural causes, but he'd just told me yesterday that he was meeting with you. He said he was finally going to tell the truth. And now he's dead. Just like your grandfather. Just like your mother. Please, please be careful. My father said Richard Cole is more dangerous than anyone knows." I hung up the phone and sat in the darkness of my apartment, my own heart pounding. Thomas was dead. My only witness was gone. And somewhere out there, my father, the man who'd murdered at least 3 people, knew someone was coming for him. I didn't sleep for the next 2 days. Everyone that drove past my apartment made me jump. Every phone call could be a threat. Thomas Whitmore's death wasn't a coincidence. Richard knew someone was coming for him, and he was eliminating threats. But I'd planned for this. I'd made copies of everything. I'd given sealed documents to Virginia Hayes with instructions to release them if anything happened to me. I'd sent encrypted files to the journalist. Richard could kill me, but he couldn't stop the truth anymore. The night of the Portland Business Excellence Awards came faster than I expected. I put on my funeral suit again and drove downtown. The ceremony was at the Riverside Convention Center, a massive glass building overlooking the water. News vans lined the street outside. Camera crews set up equipment. This was the biggest business event of the year. I walked through security with my ticket, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The main hall was filled with round tables covered in white cloth. A stage sat at the front with a podium and massive screens on either side. At least 500 people filled the room. I recognized faces from television. The mayor was there, the governor, CEOs of major corporations, and at the head table, right in front of the stage, sat my father with Connor and Derek on either side of him. Richard wore an expensive tuxedo and a smile that made my skin crawl. He looked so proud, so successful, so untouchable. I found my seat in the back of the room. From here, I could barely see the stage, but that was fine. I wasn't here to watch. I was here to act. The ceremony started with dinner. Waiters brought out fancy food I couldn't taste. My stomach was twisted in knots. I watched the stage, waiting for the right moment. Several awards were given out first: business innovation, community leadership, entrepreneurship. Each winner gave a short speech while the audience clapped politely. Finally, the host announced the Lifetime Achievement Award. This year's recipient has built one of the most successful pharmaceutical companies in the Pacific Northwest. His innovations have helped millions of patients. His business acumen has created hundreds of jobs. Please welcome Richard Cole to the stage. The room erupted in applause. Richard stood and walked to the podium, waving like a celebrity. Connor and Derek stood too, clapping loudly for their father. The screens showed Richard's face, smiling and gracious. "Thank you," Richard said into the microphone. "This is truly an honor. When I started Cole Pharmaceuticals 35 years ago, I had nothing but a dream and determination. I've worked hard every day since then to build something meaningful, something that helps people, something I can pass on to my sons." He gestured to Connor and Derek. They smiled and waved. The audience clapped again. "Family is everything to me," Richard continued, and I almost laughed at the lie. Building a legacy isn't just about money or success. It's about values. It's about teaching the next generation what really matters. I stood up from my table. Several people nearby looked at me, confused. I started walking toward the stage. A security guard stepped forward, but I kept moving. "Excuse me," the security guard said, reaching for my arm. "I'm Richard Cole's son," I said loudly. "I have something important to say." Richard's head snapped toward me. His face went pale. For just a second, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. He knew. He knew this moment had come. "Nathan," Richard said into the microphone, trying to sound calm. "Son, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time," I said, climbing the steps to the stage. The audience murmured. Camera operators swung their equipment toward me. This was all being broadcast live. "Everyone here thinks you're a hero. They think you built Cole Pharmaceuticals from nothing. But that's a lie." "Security!" Connor shouted from the front table. "I have evidence," I said, pulling papers from my jacket. "Evidence that Richard Cole built his empire on patents stolen from my grandfather Samuel. Evidence that he murdered my grandfather in 1989 to cover up the theft. Evidence that he poisoned my mother 20 years ago when she discovered the truth." The room went completely silent. Richard's face turned from pale to red. "Nathan, you're having some kind of breakdown. This is grief talking." "I have my mother's letter," I shouted. "I have my grandfather's original research. I have blood tests proving she was poisoned with compounds from your lab. I have documentation of the patent theft." I turned to the audience. "And I've already given all of it to the Portland Tribune and the federal authorities." As if on cue, the doors at the back of the hall opened. Federal agents in suits walked in, followed by the journalist I'd been working with. Virginia Hayes stood behind them, holding a briefcase full of documents. "Richard Cole," one of the agents said, walking toward the stage. "You need to come with us. We have questions about irregularities in your patent filings and possible involvement in 3 suspicious deaths." The room erupted. People stood up. Cameras flashed. Richard's face twisted with rage. "You ungrateful little... This is insane! I never..." "Dad, just stop," a voice said. Everyone turned. Derek had stood up from the head table. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. "Just stop lying." Richard stared at his son. "Derek, sit down." "No," Derek said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his own envelope. An old, yellowed envelope. "Mom gave me a letter too. She gave one to all of us. Connor and I got ours on our 30th birthdays. She told us everything. She told us what you did to Grandpa Samuel. She told us about the stolen patents. She told us you were killing her." Connor's face had gone white. He sat frozen at the table, staring at his brother. "I've known for 12 years, Derek said, his voice breaking. 12 years, Dad. And I did nothing. I kept working for you. I helped you build this company on lies and murder because I was too afraid to lose everything. I told myself maybe Mum was wrong. Maybe she was confused from the cancer medications. But I knew. Deep down, I always knew." "Derek, shut your mouth," Richard hissed. "I can't anymore," Derek said. Tears ran down his face. "Nathan, I'm sorry. I got Mum's letter when I turned 30. She told me you'd get yours on Dad's 70th birthday. She said you'd be the one to finally do what was right because you were the only one of us who stayed good. I've been waiting for this moment for 12 years, hoping you'd be braver than me. And you were." I stared at my brother. All this time he'd known, all the years of insults and mockery and watching me be treated like garbage, he'd known the truth. "You coward," I said quietly. "Thomas Whitmore died 2 days ago. He was going to testify. If you'd spoken up years ago, he'd still be alive." Derek's face crumpled. "I know. I know. I have to live with that now." The federal agents reached the stage. They put handcuffs on Richard while he screamed about lawyers and lawsuits and how we'd all regret this. Connor finally moved, standing up like he might try to help our father. But one look from the lead agent made him sit back down. As they led Richard away, he looked at me with pure hatred. "You'll get nothing," he spat. "The company sale is happening. Your brothers will still be rich. You destroyed me, but you're still the failure. You're still worthless." "No," Virginia Hayes said, stepping forward with her briefcase. "Actually, the company sale is void. Once this evidence goes public, Cole Pharmaceuticals is legally compromised. Every patent will be challenged. Every drug formula will be questioned. The company's value is 0. And since Connor and Derek knew about the crimes and said nothing, they're complicit. The inheritance you promised them, that's gone too. It'll be seized as proceeds of crime." Connor's face went white. No, I didn't know anything." "I have your letter too," Virginia said calmly. "Your mother gave copies to her attorney. She knew you'd do nothing. She planned for that. I watched my brother's world collapse. Everything they'd built, everything they'd sold their souls for. Gone." Derek was crying. Connor just sat there, frozen, like his brain had stopped working. The journalist was already typing on his phone. The story would be on the Tribune's website within the hour. By morning, every news outlet in the country would have it. Richard Cole's empire would burn, and everyone would know why. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt satisfied. My mother's justice was done. My grandfather's legacy was restored. Richard would spend the rest of his life in prison. But all I felt was tired and sad. Over the next 3 months, everything unfolded exactly as Virginia predicted. Richard was formally charged with 3 counts of murder and multiple counts of fraud and patent theft. The trial would take years, but the evidence was overwhelming. Cole Pharmaceuticals declared bankruptcy. The company sale fell through. Connor and Derek were investigated, but ultimately not charged. Their knowledge of the crimes wasn't enough to prosecute, but it was enough to destroy their reputations. They lost everything. Their houses, their cars. Their wives left them. Last I heard, Derek was working at a pharmacy, filling prescriptions for minimum wage. Connor moved to another state, trying to start over with nothing. I used my mother's $8 million trust fund exactly as she'd wanted. I built a state-of-the-art veterinary hospital on the edge of Portland, free clinics twice a week for families who couldn't afford care. A foundation that gave scholarships to veterinary students, a research program focused on affordable animal medicine. I named it the Margaret and Samuel Foundation, after my mother and grandfather. The hospital opened 6 months after Richard's arrest. It's beautiful. Everything I ever dreamed of. Every day I help animals and their families. Every day I honor my mother's memory the right way. Not with revenge, but with kindness, with empathy, with the values she taught me. But I'd be lying if I said everything was perfect. Derek showed up at my hospital one Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after the opening. He looked terrible, thin and tired, with dark circles under his eyes. He stood in the parking lot for 20 minutes before finally coming inside. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said when I agreed to see him in my office. "I just needed you to know that I'm sorry. Mom was right about you. She knew you'd be brave enough to do what Connor and I couldn't, and I'm sorry I let you face it alone. I'm sorry I let Thomas Whitmore die. I'm sorry for everything." I looked at my brother, and I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just emptiness. "Thank you for telling the truth at the ceremony," I said. "That took courage, even if it came too late." "Can we ever—" Derek started, then stopped. "No, of course not. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry." He left. I haven't seen him since. Amy came to the hospital opening. She hugged me and told me she was proud of me. We're still friends, but that's all we'll ever be. The damage from those years with my father between us was too deep. Sometimes late at night, when the hospital is quiet, I sit in my office and look at the framed photo of my mother on my desk. She's smiling in the picture, young and healthy, before the cancer, before the poison, before everything fell apart. "I did it, Mum," I whisper to the photo. "I got justice, just like you asked." But then I think about Derek's letter, about how my mother knew all 3 of her sons would get letters, and she knew exactly which one would act. She'd orchestrated everything from beyond the grave. She'd turned me into a weapon. She'd sacrificed Thomas Whitmore, knowing he'd die. She'd destroyed my brothers, knowing they weren't brave enough to act, but would suffer anyway. My mother got her revenge through me, and I'm glad she did. Richard deserved everything he got, but sometimes I wonder if she ever considered what this would cost me, the family I'd never have again. The brothers who betrayed me through their silence, the weight of being the only one who did the right thing. I built something good from all this pain. The hospital helps hundreds of animals every month. The foundation has given scholarships to 40 students so far. I'm doing exactly what I always wanted to do, with the resources to do it right. But on my birthday last month, when I turned 43, I ate dinner alone in my apartment. No family, no brothers. Just me and the ghost of my mother's final wish. I got justice. I proved I wasn't worthless. I honored her memory. But I'm not sure I got peace. Thanks for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories like this. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments.